Welcome to Photo Active, a podcast about photography in the Apple ecosystem. I'm Kirk McElhearn.
And I'm Jeff Carlson.
This episode is brought to you by Masters of Photography, online masterclasses with the greatest photographers in the world. We'll have a special offer for you on Masters of Photography courses later in the show. We'd like to welcome our guest, Norah Levine, photographer, artist, writer, and new mom, who's here to talk about her book, Pet Photography, published by Rocky Nook. Norah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
50% of the Photo Active hosts have pets.
Really?
Hang on. 100%, we have a bird.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
I'm not allergic to birds, so
that's why we
can have a bird.
That's why we talked to someone about bird photography recently.
Yes, that was the only reason.
Well, I really like pet photography. I've got 2 cats, and if you've been following the show for a while, you've certainly seen photos of them on some of the show note pages. And I really like pet photography. It's challenging, it's interesting, and I don't have kids at home anymore. I have a son who's 29 years old. And pet photography is something, I guess anyone who has a pet and has a camera is going to take pictures of their pets, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most people that have pets are really into their pets. They spend a lot of time with them. And now that photography has become more ubiquitous, most people have cameras, if not digital SLRs, they have cameras on their phones. And so, you know, they're family members, they're part of your household. So most people want to take pictures of them. Yeah, I find that it's a popular thing now to do.
And you take pet photos as a professional, don't you? So you go into people's houses and you get their animals to pose and you take portraits and print them. Are there a lot of people that want professional photos of their pets?
Yes, I mean, it's been something I've been doing for over 15 years. It has become more of a thing now and more common now than it was initially. Kind of started out as maybe something that only some people did, and now it's pretty common that people really feel like their animals are part of their family. And so as much as a family portrait photographer would be needed, a pet portrait photographer is in demand because people want to document their families. So it's part of something that's normal for people. And I love going into people's homes because it shows a personal aspect of their lives. It's different than going to a park, which can be fun. And I also do that. But a lot of times I prefer to go into people's homes and include their surroundings and personal style and incorporate that as well into the portraits. And also, pets are really comfortable in their own home. So it seems to work out well that way.
That's a really good point. How often do you find that people are asking for, like I want a photo setup of just my pet, or versus, here's our family and it's pictures of us with the pet? I mean, is there a difference there, or in terms of being more deliberate about what you're shooting?
I think most people are typically looking to be included in the portraits these days, specifically because they can take photographs of their own pets with their phones and their own cameras. But what's really difficult is being in your own photographs. And what I love what I love most about capturing people with their animals is that connection. And that's something that you really can't do in a selfie. It's not as easy. It's fun to do that, but there's no comparison to having a professional photograph you and your family and your loved ones and your pets. So I find that the majority of people want to include their pet and be in the photographs, and they also want kind of hero portraits of their pets as well. It's something that it's a level above what most people can do on their own too. So I get a little bit of both.
We like to say that this is not a podcast about gear, and it's not. We don't talk about specific cameras and lenses. But when you're shooting a specific type of subject, gear is important. And you have a whole chapter in your book about gear. Briefly, what does one need for really good pet photos? Obviously, more than a smartphone. What I like to call a real camera, not that I'm denigrating smartphone cameras. What's the ideal camera kit for shooting pets?
Well, I don't know that there's an ideal, but for me and the way that I like to work, I think having a decent zoom lens is good because it allows you to get on the ground, be kind of at eye level with the dog, cat, or whatever, whoever you're photographing, and they move around a lot. So it allows you to kind of have flexibility while you're working and not have to physically move, which can also sometimes disturb the scene, so this gives you a lot more flexibility. So for example, I love a 24 to 70 millimeter lens that allows me to physically connect and be interacting with the pets. And I'm mostly talking about dogs and cats here, and same with horses sometimes too. But when I find if I have a really long telephoto lens, there's just more physical distance between me and the animal, and it's a lot more difficult for me to have connection with that animal. So for me, a zoom lens is probably the must have.
But can't that be useful sometimes to be a little bit further away from a pet that might be a bit skittish? I'm thinking more of cats than dogs.
Definitely, a longer lens is an asset for horses, for definitely for cats. Just kind of being more fly on the wall, documentary, maybe a little bit more subtle. A longer lens can definitely have a place. So I think it's all part of your tool bag. Gear is important. They're tools to help you facilitate getting what you want. And I think there's nothing, there's not one perfect thing, but I feel like having a zoom lens and definitely a telephoto lens is really helpful.
I guess one of the things that I want to know is, what are some differences between your sort of general snapshotty pictures of pets versus pet photography, said in like quotes and italics? Like, what are we looking at in terms of, being more deliberate about shooting at pet photo? Do you use like extra lighting? Do you do like different setups? And honestly, part of the thing that I want to learn today is like, how do you get the pets to do what you want? Because actually, to be honest, that's like my only real question, because I can't imagine getting a cat to do anything. So like how does that work? What's the difference between, pet photography in this sense versus, hey, I'm just going to go take some pictures of my animal?
I think that's a good question. I think if you think about what makes a good portrait of a person, all of that applies to pet photography. So you asked about lighting. Yes, good lighting is huge. It's an important element. Composition, color, use of design, all of those things make a good portrait, whether you were taking a picture of a dog or a cat. I think what makes it's more challenging because you don't have a person that you can say, turn your head this way, or, lift your arm up over here and, use this posing stool. I mean, it's even a really solidly trained dog is going to kind of do what they want. So it comes with a kind of next level challenge for posing or capturing them in that environment. So I think all of the things that make a good portrait contribute to making a good portrait of a pet. The other thing is having that connection with a pet to where they look relaxed and content in the photograph. So I think a lot of times when I see portraits of people that are taking pet portraits in the beginning, the animals in their images maybe look a little bit scared, or they are timid, or they're just awkward. So I think a lot of the times it might be either an editing choice or just that connection and giving that space for that animal to be comfortable with the photograph process. So I don't know. Does that answer your question a little bit about what makes it different?
Yeah.
That part of it? Okay.
It does.
So
I'm curious as to how long it takes you to get. Obviously, you're experienced at this, so you know how to act with animals. And how long does it take you to get the animals comfortable? Obviously, all pets are different. Cats are more skittish than dogs. But does it take 15 minutes, an hour? Does it take longer to get the animal comfortable enough? Because I know that my cats, even one that's 6 years old, if I'm pointing the camera at him, he's going to look the other way because he knows it's something going on that he doesn't want. I basically get lucky when I get a good photo of one of my cats.
Sure. I mean, luck is awesome to have on your side. I think to answer your question about how long it takes, I've done events, for example, earlier on in my career where I would do photo booths. as an example. And so they were like 10-minute slots, and I would have, dogs and cats, mostly dogs, coming in every 10 minutes. And could I get one shot that was good? That was my goal. Sure, I can do that in 10 minutes. And it also does depend on the dog. So you just need 1 second or less than, 1/250th of a second to get an image that might work. The kind of bigger question and goal for me is to get basically a portfolio of images for my clients that they're going to be able to choose from, maybe make an album, a wall gallery from. So my goal is not one image. So for me, and other photographers may work differently. For me, that process is a minimum of an hour and a half long, and some of that connection is working with the pet's owners. So the more comfortable the pet's owners are, the more comfortable the animal is. And if I'm photographing a pet with their owner, then that takes some time. It takes time for people to connect with each other, to feel comfortable. And all of that kind of plays out in better photographs for me. So I personally love to take the time to create portraits in a way that isn't rushed, isn't pressured, and everybody enjoys that process. Part of the fun for me, and part of I think the lasting product is that experience for my clients. And so when they look at those photographs of their pets, not only do they have a beautiful image, but they remember the process of making the image. And for me, that is a gift beyond just a piece of paper and a print. That is like a memory that I'm giving them or facilitating for them that they can hold in their heart forever. And it sounds kind of sappy, but it's like really true for me. And what my clients repeatedly tell me is they have such a wonderful experience of making that portrait. So the time is partially making it comfortable, but also making it fun for the pet and the pet parent. And that all contributes to making a good, solid portrait and experience.
So often you need to get the owners comfortable because maybe they're worried that their pet's not going to show off correctly when you're there, and they're not going to get the kind of photos of that cute position the cat lies on the bed in, and they're afraid that they're paying you to come and take the pictures, and the cat won't act the way they want, or the dog, or whatever.
Right. I think that's a good point. And I've had experiences where it is about managing the person as well as managing the pet, and maybe more so the person and their energy, just so it is a calm environment for their pet. And I've had friends or colleagues that have said, I'm done with people portraits. I want to photograph pets. And I'm like, the pets don't call you to set up a portrait session. The pets aren't the ones, so you really have to be able to be willing to work with people. And a lot of times, pet people we're a little eccentric. I mean, there's no, it's an important part of taking the photographs is interacting with the people, making sure they're comfortable, and it spills out into the energy for the animal too.
Okay, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about photographing specific animals, such as cats, for example. Masters of Photography is a unique online learning platform that brings together some of the world's most acclaimed photographers, the Masters. You can enjoy an unprecedented insight into the way these photographers work during intimate lessons that capture their knowledge, ethos, and philosophy. I've taken the Masters of Photography course with Joel Meyerowitz, one of my favorite photographers, and I was impressed by his passion for photography and his desire to transmit his knowledge to others. With more than 5 hours of video and 34 lessons, Joel Meyerowitz discusses technique, inspiration, and his career, and gives some practical tips about shooting in the street, taking portraits, and even still life photography. I strongly recommend this course with Joel Meyerowitz, and Masters of Photography has a special offer for PhotoActive listeners. Get 5% off any course with the code PhotoActive. Go to mastersof.photography and enter the coupon code PhotoActive, or use the link in our show notes. That's mastersof.photography. I really enjoyed this course, and I think you will too. Okay, as I said before the break, we're going to talk about photographing specific animals, and you have 3 chapters in your book, one about photographing those things called dogs. The important chapter is the one photographing cats, and then there's one about horses and other animals. Let's get the dogs out of the way first. I know I'm being snarky. It's because I've always been a cat person. So dogs you have the advantage of being able to get them to sit and lie down and play dead, which no self-respecting cat would ever do. But I'm sure that there are challenges shooting dogs as well, aren't there?
Absolutely. I mean, all dogs are not created equal. They are not trained equally. So I started photographing pets in animal shelters. That's how I learned how to work with different types of personalities and characteristics and levels of training or not training. So yeah, I mean, there's challenges getting them to listen. It's kind of important to just to read what you're working with when you walk in the door. And after I interview with, the pet parents, find out kind of what they know. Do they know how to sit? Do they know how to stay? Some of them do, some of them don't. And so a lot of times for me, it's a matter of creating distractions for them or something interesting for them to perk up for. And sometimes, you might get a dog that's like a hummingbird. And what do you do with that? And it's not the easiest. So it's a matter of getting their attention just long enough to get a shot. And you asked earlier, what was kind of like, how do you get their attention? How does that work? Is that a big one? For me, I would say overall, I mean, there's squeaky toys, there's treats. Treats are a big one, but they can sometimes get overly excited about treats. So that can sometimes be a problem. I usually save treats for towards the end of a photo shoot, my last resort. But the biggest kind of thing that I talk about in the book is that whatever you use, you should use it, any kind of tactic, you should use it sparingly. And that means if you have a squeaky toy, for example, not squeak, 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 for 5 minutes, because they get desensitized. They get uninterested. And I think that's a mistake that a lot of amateurs make, or even pet parents make when they're trying to help, is they'll squeak a toy for 5 minutes and the dog could not care less about that noise anymore. But where there's interest is if something comes out of nowhere, it makes a noise and sparks kind of a curiosity, and then it disappears. Oh, and there it is again. So there's this inconsistency and a level of surprise that can pique their interest. And so it's variety as well, kind of changing it up constantly too.
So even though you have a subject that isn't necessarily willing to do everything that you would like, or that can take direction, you're still using a lot of techniques to elicit specific responses, right? I mean, you're sort of employing tricks to like grab their attention or make them look quizzical or etc.
Yeah, there's a way. I mean, I'm going for a certain kind of look. It's a relaxed, happy. A lot of times with dogs, it's their ears perked up a little bit. It's not, they're not pressed back on their head. There are signs in which when you see a photograph of a dog, that the dog looks uncomfortable. And I talk about that in my book as well. It's, their eyes wide, really showing a lot of white in their eyes, their tail tucked, their ears can be pressed back towards their head. I mean, these kinds of signs you want to do the opposite of. And so I find a lot of times making noises can elicit a different type of more of an excited, curious, generally what we would consider a happier look for a dog. So I'm directing it. I'm not a complete fly on the wall. I'm not completely passive in these photo shoots. I'm definitely a proactive participant in getting some kind of a look or a gesture from them most of the time, unless I'm photographing them in action, for example, or just interacting with their pet parent. That's another example where I may not squeak a toy when they're interacting with their pet parent.
So this is interesting because this links up with an experience I had a few months ago. My partner and I had a portrait shot by Martin Parr, who's a very well-known photographer. He has a foundation in Bristol, and he was doing a fundraising event. We'll link in the show notes to the episode where I discussed this. And he didn't have squeaky toys, but it was pretty similar. He set us up in front of a background. He had his camera, and he told us to do certain things. And he said, put your hands on her shoulder and then give him a kiss and then do this. And it was very directive to the point that we forgot that we were in front of the camera. And I'm thinking that's exactly the same thing you're trying to do, right?
Exactly. I mean, I've taught in the past as well. And I think when I teach and I talk about how to kind of create a good photograph and a good experience for clients and working with pets, it's all about creating an environment, and that includes lighting, it includes a level of comfort, it includes backgrounds, all of those things. It's like combining all those things, creating this environment, and then directing just enough to allow for natural interactions, natural responses to occur. So a lot of people say, your images look so unposed. Well, they are and they aren't. So they're directed to a certain point, and then natural interactions take place within my kind of controlled environment of lighting, background, composition, and that kind of thing.
For somebody who wants to get into doing this more than just taking pictures of their own animals, is this something where they would need a studio to do this? Or what sort of percentage of photo shoots do you do that are studio versus going to someone's house or going, out to a park or something? Like, do I need to set up a studio if I want to do this more seriously than just my own pets?
No, absolutely not. You don't need to set up
Good.
a studio. You don't need a ton of equipment. You could get a reflector. You could get, something to bounce light, a diffuser, a camera. You can go to an animal shelter and practice and volunteer and learn how to interact with animals that way while contributing to the community. You can go on location into a park. So you don't need those things. I mean, one thing I think about working in a park that's challenging is that there aren't really boundaries. So you're either working with a dog or a cat on leash. Mm-hmm. So at a home environment, it's a little bit more contained. So I think go into people's homes, you can call your friends or neighbors and say you want to practice, and most people are going to say yes and love to have the opportunity to have their pets photographed.
Do you always shoot handheld, or do you ever set up a camera on a tripod, or do you use both?
I mostly shoot handheld. I feel really limited on a tripod because I have to be so active when I'm photographing pets. I change change my angle often, you have to kind of be on the move when you're photographing pets. You can work in one area for a little while and then it kind of gets stagnant, or you can tell it's not working anymore and you want to change environments. So setting up on a tripod just seems to hold me back. What I noticed in your book, though, is a lot of the photos have very shallow depth of field, which means that you've got this narrow range of positioning to get the face in focus. Yes, it's challenging. And I photograph a lot. If I'm taking pictures for a client, I'll be there for, 2.5 hours on average. So I'm photographing a fair amount. I don't photograph on motor drive and just edit for days. But yeah, there is a practice in it. I do love shooting with a shallow depth of field, and my images are fairly simple in terms of composition. So, but yeah, tripod I feel like would just slow me down, slow the whole process down.
When you approach a photo shoot, do you typically have some ideas in mind? Like after meeting with the family, okay, this is a light colored dog. Maybe we want to set up something with a dark background, or do you have sort of setups and things in mind, or do you mostly find yourself just sort of figuring out the scene when you're there and working with it?
My preference with photographing clients is to meet them in person at the location before the photo shoot, so I can photograph with my phone some of the location options. And then I will go with some ideas in my head, not a specific hard and fast shot list, but I will have some kind of pre-planning in mind. I do tell in terms of wardrobe, I don't prefer to have everybody wearing matching clothes. That's not my style, and it doesn't tend to be my client's style. But I tell them to consider the fact that their dog or cat might be dark colored and to wear something that has a little bit of contrast. So yeah, all of that stuff is intentional.
Okay, so the most important part of the book, the chapter on photographing cats. So how do I get my cats to sit still when I want to photograph them? I know it's just not possible. And I guess that's the biggest challenge of an animal like that. It's true that some older cats will sit still, but most cats, they just don't ever do what you want them to do they? I noticed that you have one tip. Hold on. She has one tip about getting cats' attention, and it is catnip.
I was going to say, you have to drug them. Yes. I was going to make a joke, but... maybe
it's in the book there. Catnip,
it's a real deal. Yeah, I mean, catnip can go south if it can make them excited and it can make them kind of chilled out. So it depends on the cat and how they respond to it. But it's definitely something in my bag of tricks that I will pull out when I'm working with a cat. It's always a good thing to try. Cat toys, they have long cat toys. I mean, cats kind of respond to different things. They're not going to respond to squeaky toys typically. Some will be food motivated. I've been surprised where, holding a bag of treats was enough to have a cat sit in front of me or hold still long enough for me to work with them. So food motivation is sometimes an option. And, they like crinkly sounds. They like feathery toys. They like being up high. So if you can use something like a prop, piece of furniture, a cat tree or something, and photographing them in places that they already like to be is a really helpful thing. Photographing your own cats might be different than photographing somebody else's cat. So if you have a hard time photographing your own cats, maybe you want to try photographing somebody else's and see if that feels any differently for you. I mean, I feel like our cats and our dogs act kind of the way they want to around us. They might respond to somebody else differently.
I noticed a lot of the photos of cats are shot indoors. We have cats that we let out. We have a fairly large garden. And that can actually be easier because sometimes they'll run around a little bit and then they'll just find a bit of grass where they want to sit and chill for a while. Whereas in the house, they just always have a bed to run under if you're doing something.
Yeah, I think that, with any animal that I'm photographing in a house, I will close doors off so they have limited, exit points. That can be helpful. Any, kind of detaining them on some level is helpful. And having a garden space where I remember photographing a cat in a garden. It was so peaceful and they just kind of did their own thing and walked around. And it was more of a responsive interaction and photographic experience. I was just kind of seeing where he would go and then I would look for a nice background and see what I could do. So there is kind of a different approach with photographing cats. It takes patience. That's another thing is that it really does take, it's not something that can happen in a few minutes. And so sometimes just being patient and being quiet and just kind of waiting for things to show up is the way it needs to be.
So other animals, you have a chapter about horses and other animals. Do you shoot a lot of photos of people's horses?
I love photographing horses. It's something.
Where do you live?
I live in Austin, Texas.
So that's a horse area.
There's a horse area, and I used to live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, so also horses there. So, they're different. It's not something that it's not as in demand for me and something that I've promoted from a marketing perspective as much as I have with dogs and cats, but it is definitely something for people that have horses that are kind of pets to them versus like show animals, because I'm not really a show animal photographer. When somebody calls me and they want to, they show their horses or something, I'm not the photographer that anyone's going to call or hire because they want a perfect positioning on their horse in a photograph or their dog or their cat. But if they have an animal in their life that they love, like a horse, that is a part, a pet to them, then there's no difference to me capturing that connection than it would be with an owner and their dog, for example.
That sounds like a nice distinction because you can have more sort of formal portraits with people and with pets and something that's just more casual. And clearly your style leads more toward the casual, comfortable, experiential side. Is there a lot of difference between those two styles? It sounds as if the more formal ones would be, more nitpicky, or is that?
Well, for me, it's the reason I love to photograph animals and people together, and that's become more of an important aspect of my work in the later years of my career, is that connection that people have. And that's just not, and it's not to say that people that have horses that show them in an arena don't have a good connection with their horse, but it's not as relaxed of for portrait speak, it's not as relaxed of a connection to photograph. So for me, it's just my preference. I'm trying to get the types of clients that I want to work with and have experiences in ways as an artist that I want. So it's just kind of what I've gravitated.
Okay. As someone who doesn't own pets, it's nice to hear that there's more to it than just, hey, I'm going to point my camera at a dog. That this really does have like all the same variety and visual and emotional differences as, people portrait photography. And sometimes you got to use treats to influence the people too. So
yeah, we all need treats.
Okay, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Norah Levine, the book is Pet Photography. If you are a subscriber to our newsletter at photoactive.co, we are giving away 2 copies of the book. So if you're not a subscriber, subscribe to our newsletter. Norah, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. It was a real pleasure.
Okay, it's time for our snapshots. I think Jeff has something really interesting this week. Jeff, what have you got?
So let me preface this by saying, as a person who writes about photography, I get lots of PR materials about Kickstarter projects. And most of them I really want to ignore because either they're silly or they're small or they're not funded yet. People really just want attention for their Kickstarters. And that's fine, but it's not really something that we tend to do. I'm going to make an exception this week. My snapshot is the travel tripod by Peak Design. Now, they launched this as a Kickstarter because they've launched all their products. Kirk and I have both had various different bags and straps from Peak Design.
Straps and excellent stuff.
Excellent stuff. And they've also always delivered on their stuff. A lot of Kickstarters don't. And also, I bring this up because this project is already funded, so it's going to happen. In fact, it's sort of spectacularly...
It's more than already funded. I think they blew away their funding goal in less than a day.
Yeah, their goal was $500,000 to get this into production. And as I look at it now, a couple weeks before, or a week or so before the show is posted, they're past $5 million. So this is definitely going to happen. So it's the travel tripod by Peak Design. I also say this too because I have one here right now for a very short amount of time. One of my editors at DP Review let me borrow the one that they got. What's cool about this tripod? It is, well, first of all, go back and listen to our episode on tripods because it talks a lot about stability and size. This is a travel tripod, so it's very small. And it's not small in the sense of sort of being tall, but in terms of density. So when it's all folded and compact, the diameter is about the size of a water bottle. Compared to the 3-legged thing tripod that I got to go to Hawaii, like that is almost double the width in terms of the circumference of the tripod. When it's fully extended, they're both about the same height. The travel tripod comes in either aluminum or carbon fiber, and I'm a little surprised that the carbon fiber on the Kickstarter is a lot more popular than the aluminum. So the Kickstarter price for the carbon travel tripod is $479. Normally it's going to be a $600 tripod. The aluminum one is $289. Normally it's going to be $350. It's compact. It's fairly light. And it has an integrated ball head. And what's interesting about the ball head here is it doesn't take up much more space. Unlike other ball heads that have 2 or 3 knobs for positioning the camera, this has just one large circular dial that adjusts the tension of the entire ball head. We'll have pictures in the show notes. You really have to see it to see how it works.
And in fact, go to the Kickstarter webpage and look at the video that they have that explains it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I will mention that the one that I have here, it is pre-production. So, I haven't really reviewed it at all. But just like my playing with it for a day or so, it's a lot more stable than I expected. Part of the issue is the ball head comes up from a center column. You need to raise it at least a little bit in order to use the ball head. And so normally you would think, okay, as soon as you raise the center column, that's when things get a little more little more shaky. This seems to be a lot more sturdy than others that I've seen with the column completely raised. With Peak Design stuff, it's very cleverly designed. It has extra little things like from the bottom of the center column, they've integrated a small smartphone bracket. So you can just put that up onto the ball head and mount your smartphone when you need to get some shots, or like maybe a long time lapse or something. It's very, very cool. I've ordered one, and I think if you're looking for a travel tripod specifically, not something that's going to be super huge, it's definitely worth looking into.
I think the one thing that impresses me the most is the way you can flip the ball head to go into portrait mode very quickly, which usually isn't the case on a tripod, and that's why people often have an L bracket. It really seems to be very clever that's just eliminated all of the complicated... Every time I take my tripod out, I can't remember which knob adjusts which axis on the tripod. And this looks like there's just one thing. The camera clicks in easily. You slide a ring to lock it in. It looks really good. I'm really looking forward to this.
It's very cool. It's very cool. Kirk, do you have something for this week?
I do. I have actually ordered a new camera. I am emulating Jeff in ordering a Fuji X-T3. I've been thinking about this for a while. Now, I've had very good experience buying from Fujifilm here in the UK, buying refurbished products, and I've bought several lenses from them. And the Fujifilm X-T3 lists for £1,349, and the standard refurb price was $9.99. They dropped it by £50, plus I had a 5% discount. I'll put a link in the show notes so anyone can get a 5% discount from the Fuji store if they're in the UK. So that made it £900, so 2/3 of the price of new, and I trust that it's a good refurb. It's not going to be a problem. One of the main reasons I wanted this, and I'm currently using a Fuji X Pro 2, which I really, really like, but one of the main reasons is for pet photography, because my Fujifilm X Pro 2 does not have an articulating LCD, and that's something I really miss from other cameras I've had, Olympus cameras I had in the past. I very often like to put the camera low, angle the LCD up, and shoot either pets or flowers like that, or sometimes to just get a different point of view on anything else that I'm shooting. You know, the way people used to use those twin lens reflex cameras back in the day. They would look down and shoot, and they'd be shooting from the waist, and that gives a different image than when you're shooting from the head. And there are a couple of other reasons. The better autofocus, as we discussed in a recent episode, link in the show notes. And one other thing is that the viewfinder is better. It's got more dots, it's bigger, and the eyepiece is a lot bigger. My vision isn't great, and I don't see very much out of my right eye, so I need what I see in the viewfinder to be really good. I like the idea with the viewfinder in the center instead of the left. It's not entirely gear acquisition syndrome, but I had been thinking about it since the X-T3 came out, so I took advantage of this price. And I should have it tomorrow, well before the next episode comes out. So I've picked a snapshot that I don't even have. So.
I don't think it's gear acquisition syndrome when you're moving up from something older. I mean, this could just be me trying to justify my purchases, but I went from the XT1 to the XT3, and it feels like
that was a lot older.
It's a lot older. It's a big jump. And I was also going to say about the articulating screen, which is something that I've had for, a long time, so I didn't even think about it. But I like that you pointed out not only that it has it, but, for all sorts of photography, that also gets you out from behind the camera. So if you're shooting pictures of people or pets, you're not just this dark mass in front of your face. You can interact better.
Okay, that's enough. I'm going to go shoot pictures of my cats. Jeff, I want to see some pictures of your bird.
I will go take some pictures of my bird.
Thanks for listening to Photoactive. You can find show notes, including any photos we discuss in the show, at photoactive.co. That's photoactive.co. We couldn't afford the M. You can subscribe to Photoactive in your favorite podcast app or in Apple Podcasts. See the links on our website. And think about leaving us a rating or review on iTunes or in your podcast app. Don't forget that you can get 5% off any course at Masters of Photography with the coupon code PHOTOACTIVE. That's PHOTOACTIVE in one word. Until next week, thanks again for listening.